regular board meeting. It's scheduled today for June 27th, and the time is 6:30. Why don't we have a roll call to see who's attending? Tori, if you would, please. Thank you.
Manager Lowe.
Sorry, I'm here.
Oh, sorry. Manager Anderson. Here. Manager Baki.
Here.
Manager Taves. I saw him get admitted, so. President Schmaltz.
Here. So.
Okay, I'm here now too.
Okay, thanks. Good. Okay, then, moving on then, the next step is to set the meeting agenda. Are there any suggested changes or additions?
Manager Schmaltz,
Yes,
could we add the quarterly review meeting scheduled for July 1st?
okay, we'll put that under old business. Or what do you think, Mike? New or old business?
Yeah, all business. Yes.
Okay. Any other changes?
I'd like to add, under new business, a topic for, the gauge readings for lake depths.
Okay. And then I'd like to add a subject also. It has to do with some recent activity on Forest Lake, finding a significant amount of hybrid milfoil. So we'd have a couple decisions to make tonight as a board. One has to do with funding, and then the second has to do with how we move forward to maybe adjust our AAS policy on Eurasian water milfoil. So I'm going to add that as EWM under new business. Okay. Any other suggested changes? Hearing none, then I'll entertain a motion to accept the meeting as amended by the three of us.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Manager Anderson. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Doug. Okay, why don't we have a roll call vote, Tori? Thank you.
Manager Lowe.
Aye.
Manager Anderson.
Aye.
Manager Baki.
Aye.
Manager Taves.
Aye.
President Schmaltz.
Aye, so the motion carries. Moving on to the consent agenda, we have 3 items today on the consent agenda. The special board meeting minutes of May 2nd, 2024, regular board meeting minutes of May 9th, 2024, and the regular board meeting minutes of May 22nd, 2024. Are there any additions or corrections? Okay, then I'll entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Manager Anderson. Do we have a second to that motion? I'll second that motion. And then Tori, could you please do the roll call vote?
Manager Lowe.
Aye.
Manager Anderson.
Aye.
Manager Baki.
Aye.
Manager Taves.
Aye.
President Schmaltz.
Aye, so consent agenda then passes. Moving on to item 4, the public open forum. I declare that the public open forum is open. Do we have any guests or visitors that would like to address the board this evening? I'll ask again, are there any visitors or guests that would like to address the board? Okay, hearing none, then I'll declare that the public open forum is closed. Moving on to our next agenda item, the Citizen Advisory Committee update.
Mr. President, Aiden Reed is here this evening to go over that. Thank you, Aiden.
All right, good evening, Mr. President, managers. I've provided an update with the notes from the June 18th meeting of the Citizens Advisory Committee. A couple of items we touched on. The committee continues to be involved in participating in the budget process. So they provided some valuable comments that were passed on to Emily Hines. They had also requested an update on the office space discussion, so we gave them a brief overview of what that's looked like so far and the process that's been followed. And then I think most interesting to the committee is we've been discussing another summer field trip, and the committee's decided that a shoreline tour of Forest Lake would be what they'd like to do this year. So we are in the planning processes of that, and we'll be inviting the Board of Managers to attend once we have details a little bit more finalized. And that's all I have for an update. Any questions or anything I can answer for you?
Thanks, Aiden. Any questions or comments from the board? Okay, thanks, Aiden. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Next item is the AIS update. Garrett,
And Mr. President, Garrett Miller is here to
okay,
present that.
Hi, Mr. President and managers. Yes, couple updates. So I'll kick it off and try to keep it quick. The watercraft inspection program, as you're aware, we're off to a really strong start this season. Had 8 inspectors basically working from right at the start. And just like Memorial Weekend, where we had full coverage for the whole holiday weekend, as of right now, I have the 4th of July weekend scheduled out. So there'll at least be an inspector basically at every access from Thursday to Sunday for at least 8 hours. So at least 1 shift per access per day. And including that, as usual, will be some handouts, educational handouts, and then, some fun bait bucket stickers and other things that are becoming kind of a custom for the district's program at this point for the holidays. So we're really expecting a lot of boater traffic, so a lot of interactions, and we're fully prepared, fully staffed, and ready to go. Curlew pondweed. So I've been having some results roll in this week in terms of curlew pondweed. We did treatments this year on Forest, Comfort, and Fields Lake. Fields Lake was the smallest one. We only treated near the public pier, fishing pier, and that area was effectively managed, which opens up access to the lake. And then we just kind of let the rest of the lake have a little bit of curlew pondweed, intermixed with the coontail to provide a little bit of fish refuge, and that seems to have worked. The control method worked pretty well. For Forest Lake, which I can share my screen if that's okay. Or is that okay, Tori?
Sorry, say that again?
Am I able to share my screen?
Yep, sorry.
Okay. So this year we did a 17-acre treatment for curlew pondweed on Forest Lake, and within the treatment areas, it was definitely effective at knocking it down. And while this looks like a lot of survey points with curlew pondweed, we also have to keep into consideration that these green dots can be representative of a single stem of curlew pondweed. So this does not show that curlew pondweed is of significance in terms of being a nuisance to recreation, and certainly this is imposing an ecological problem at this point. So yes, it is present. You might see some hitting the surface, but within the next couple of weeks, it'll be dying off on Forest Lake. And so I think this year, given the unusual winter conditions and fearing, 100+ acres, this is actually a pretty good result. Moving on to Boone Lake. We didn't do a treatment, but this was the severity of it. And honestly, we haven't had to do treatments for the last few years for curlew pondweed, and I do believe that it has something to do with the improved water quality. And so as that water quality is sustained and continues to increase as the district performs other potential projects in the area, I'm hopeful that the native plant community will continue to be able to outcompete curlew pondweed, and we won't have to do much in terms of management. And then the last map I'll share is is Comfort Lake. Oh, this is the assessment. So we did perform just under 10 acres worth of treatment on Comfort Lake this year, which was a bit of a surprise. We were not anticipating that. Again, given the unusual winter conditions, the DNR pushed up our treatment deadline by about a month. So we ended up performing that treatment a month earlier than normal. And, you know, within the areas that we treated, it was relatively successful. However, I think some of the heavy growth that some of the lake residents have noticed, especially in the Polygon 2, this is growth that occurred after the treatment. And so I'm hopeful that, you know, we have a normal winter and that the DNR doesn't kind of have a knee-jerk reaction to that, and we'll be able to treat on a normal timeline, and we'll be able to more effectively knock this down next season if we do need to continue management for Curly Pond on Comfort Lake. I'll stop sharing that. Last couple updates, Flowering Rush. We sent out a mailer, a handout, an educational packet, however you like to describe it, to all the Forest Lake residents. And it was just information on the biology of Flowering Rush, how to identify it, some native lookalikes, and then how to actively participate in the management of it. And all we were asking for lake residents this year is to, if they see seed heads along their shoreline, to clip them, properly dispose of them following the instructions that we provided, and then to contact the district, me, so that we can track the number of seed heads we're collecting and where. We think for long-term management of Flowering Rush on Forest Lake that this is going to be very helpful, as it's, you know, a large lake. It requires a lot of staff time to go out and survey the entire thing. So I think this is the next evolution in our management strategy. And staff were out today. We did a very brief look at Flowering Rush along the shoreline, and we'll have to wait for Steve McComas's proper full lake Flowering Rush survey. That's probably going to come in the next couple of weeks in mid-July. But I do believe that the higher water levels this year are inhibiting some of its growth, as some of the heavier patches that I was called out to survey last year were not showing as much growth this season. I was finding maybe a few stems. So fingers crossed that it's not as prevalent as it was last year. The other thing is the expanded rapid response plan that was mentioned a couple months ago. I had finished that, and I have, as of a couple weeks ago, met with individuals from all three lake associations to discuss that rapid response plan. So I just want to make the board aware that those partners are involved in that. They saw the work that we have put together and are fully informed of how the district might react to a new infestation. And my example was starry stonewort, which hopefully, you know, all this work of putting this together is never used, but it is in our back pocket if we ever do need it. And the very last update is Eurasian water milfoil, which I know will be a discussion, larger discussion for later. So I will just share the survey results. And so the Forest Lake Association has been managing it for a number of years and has done a good job at containing it to the first basin. And unexpectedly on June 20th, when McComas was, Jerry Grutner at the Lake Association received reports that there might be some growth of Eurasian in Basin 3 and 2. We had McComas go out on the 20th, and this is unexpectedly what he found. So this is, if you, let me share the other one. I'm sorry. Do I not have it readily available? I apologize. Oh, here it is. So we have about 7 locations that were Polygon 4 treatment, which totals about 48 acres of potential treatment. And I know that the Forest Lake Association is interested in some sort of management, and I believe that will be discussed here shortly. So with that, those are my few quick updates, but I can take any questions if there are any at this time.
Manager Anderson.
Yeah, Mr. President,
Manager Anderson had her hand up first, so I'll get you next, Doug.
okay,
Garrett, can you pull up Little Comfort Lake's map from this report?
That survey report?
Yes, the one that shows all of them. All the different varieties.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? My audio wasn't working.
Little Comfort.
The survey map that was created or was performed
Yeah,
earlier this
yeah,
year?
the one that shows purple loosestrife, curly leaf, you know, all together. That map.
Yes, I have.
Well, if it's too much trouble, what, my point is this, you just mentioned in your report that you worked with the Lake Association, I forget which lake it was now, but I think it was Forest, it might have been Bone, where you sent out a flyer or some type of information on how to treat or how to involve themselves in the maintenance of flowering rush.
Yeah.
And on Little Comfort, we have purple loosestrife in the shallow areas of the lake. And it looked like that had expanded over last year. And I think that we've got an opportunity to do that same type of awareness, mailing or communication drop off, to teach the folks on Little Comfort how to participate in that maintenance. You know, with the proper pulling techniques or whatever else they need to do.
Yeah, that is a good idea. And in fact, I think I have a good brochure that's not created, but it is a go-to brochure that I share with individuals. So that is something that we can definitely share.
Okay.
And I can pass it along to the Lake Association as well.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Doug, you had a question?
Oh, yeah, Garrett. I don't think Moody was scheduled for a survey this year, but we have a bumper crop of curly leaf pondweed out here. And as it's dying back now, the coontail's coming through it farther out than we've seen before. So just a heads up on it.
I appreciate you bringing that up, and yeah, I apologize for not mentioning it here. There was admittedly probably a couple acres that could have been treated this season. The only reason that we decided not to go that route was just because we had done that native planting for that transplanting project where we're kind of working with the university. So depending on the results of that, I mean, we obviously didn't want to impact that. We want to get them the best results possible for their larger research. But if there is that much curly pondweed next year, I suspect that a treatment will be performed. So I did see it. I am aware of it, and I was a little surprised that, you know, it was reaching nuisance levels when I really thought we were on a good trajectory and not having to treat. So
Yeah, it's kind of an anomaly of a year.
it was a very strange year. Yes.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
Did the curly leaf pondweed polygons overlap with the planting areas?
Yes, the one tree or one of the larger areas that was potentially polygon for treatment would have been right next to the public access, which is a location that we initially did some of the planting, but also on a smaller water body like Shields or Moody Lake, even a few acres of treatment can get lake-wide control, as we have seen in the past. So it was early in the season that we treated. However, unusual winter. We think some of our native plants could have got an early start as well. So we just wanted to play it safe. But we are aware, and next year will be a little different when, you know, we're not doing that research project necessarily.
Will the university be out there this summer or what time will they be out there to assess the growth?
Sometime in July.
Scooters that in.
No, right
Okay,
now.
thank you.
We think it's already.
Anything else for Garrett? Before we leave, I want to ask Council Holtman if we could move up. I had suggested we cover the Eurasian water milfoil issue in new business, but since we've got Garrett here and he's already showed the first chart, can we discuss that now rather than waiting to new business, Council Holtman?
Yes, Mr. Chair, if that's the manager's preference.
I think so. If we got Garrett here, we can use him and then he can leave if he has to at this point in time. So, do you want me to give a quick summary, Garrett, of what's happened? Maybe you could put that map back up if you would. And I'll give a quick background and kind of lay out what decisions have to be made today by the board. Okay, so about 2 weeks ago, if I recall, we had a report from one of our vendors that there was some apparent possible hybrid Eurasian water milfoil at the Lake 3 access, and we never had any milfoil in Lake 3. So when we went out to check that, I think Blaine and Garrett went out, they couldn't find it, and they found some small traces, if I recall. Right after that, then, because we thought this would have been maybe a rapid response program, because it had never been in Lake 3 before, Steve McComas went out around and did a survey on all 3 lakes, as you can see here, and there was just some traditional small amount of normal Eurasian water milfoil in Lake 1. Couldn't find any milfoil in Lake 3, but we found this explosion of milfoil in Lake 2, which was really quite a surprise. And it turns out that this is a hybrid, not a traditional Eurasian water milfoil like we have in Lake 1. So we met with Steve McComas and Jerry Gruntner had been getting a lot of the information about treatment and so forth. And we had a discussion on this a couple days ago with Steve McComas, and he felt that from his experience, that it was a hybrid version of Eurasian water milfoil, and that sometimes these hybrid versions can explode on a lake for no reason at all. And that's kind of what's happened here, it appears. So the cost to treat this, there was a number of options given, but for 48 acres, the cost with the best option that we could find would be around $70,000. And at that meeting we had, we decided to suggest that this would be covered by the tri-party agreement between the city, the watershed district, and the Lake Association, with a normal percentage spread outs of, I think, 42.5% for us, 42.5% for the city, and the balance then 15% to the watershed, to the Lake Association. Garrett has some concerns about that with the budget, and also about our ability to treat it based upon our 10-year plan. So this kind of put us at an impasse, and we decided to bring this to the board, because if we're going to treat it, we have to treat it fairly quickly, not let it just go forward. So we're bringing this to the board right now, and we have 2 decisions to make tonight. One is, do we want to spend $24,000, our fair share, to treat this now, and then this would be resolved through the tri-party agreement. And the second point would be is that it looks like with this new hybrid that we may have to look at changing our traditional policy on how we handle Eurasian water milfoil. If you recall, we last discussed this for Comfort Lake, and we did approve that special allocation. But it goes beyond that, because there's other things that we have to be concerned about now with this hybrid. So we want to get into those details.
Ours is hybrid too, mostly hybrid.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the most common.
Right.
So
So I guess that's kind of where we are. So we have to vote yes or no, whether we want to do our fair share of 24,500, and then lay out a path forward to how we want to address this. But in the meantime, I don't know whether you've rethought your position, Garrett, and if you have or have not, I guess we'd like to hear what staff recommends as a course of action to deal with the situation.
Well, I appreciate that, President Schmaltz. My only concerns at yesterday's meeting was just, making sure that Chuck was okay with the decision or how this was being handled, because I know that the board had heard staff's recommendations on this topic last January, and decisions were made that, above 180 stems was considered ecological, below as recreational. But I would honestly defer to the boards and the administrator's best judgment on this, of how to proceed. We can
So you don't
staff.
you don't have a recommendation, Garrett, or what, based upon what you've seen and so forth, and talking with McComas, et cetera?
you just gave it.
Okay.
Those numbers that he gave.
Right, okay. So with that, then I guess I'd like to bring up some additional information, because there was quite a bit of talk about the fact that our 10-year plan as it stands today would not cover this because of the stem densities being over 100, not being under 160, which would not preclude it for the definition for heavy growth. But when you look into the 10-year plan,
They're all still there, I'm sorry.
Okay, for people.
They can still see those.
okay, fine. So I would like, Garrett, do you have those slides I asked you to prepare?
I have the document pulled up, and I can zoom in on from the paragraphs you wanted highlighted, yes.
If you could do that, that would be helpful.
Yes, just, 1 second, apologies. Yeah. Um, Open, okay, here we go. Too many tabs open. Okay, so,
You could pull up the first one that I had,
page 109, first paragraph.
3011 1A, yeah.
Do you want me to read it or?
No, I've asked you to enlarge it so we could just show that paragraph so everybody could see it. And I'll just make a comment about it. What it says here basically is that this is an introduction and it talks about that AIS is a multifaceted, constantly evolving and high visibility and high interest to the public. So this is a hot button for the public. That's the first point I wanted to make. If you go to the next point then,
Page 111. First, G. Okay.
yeah, this one had to do with the overall health body of the water. And it talks about, as you had suggested before, that AIS president will be based on the benefit to the ecological system. So we're gonna look at ecological systems here in terms of deciding whether or not we go ahead. And the point I want to make here is that the ecological system we're using as a standard right now is fish. And that's only one of the standards that we want to look at. So in the case of fish, you have to have a stem count above 160 per square meter to be able to treat it as high density or heavy growth. So with that, let's go on to the next one, goal 3 at the bottom of that page.
Okay.
So it says goal 3 is to manage existing population of AIS to improve native plant diversity by managing AIS populations that pose a risk to native plant growth. So in this situation, when we talked to Steve McComas, he mentioned the fact that our ecology situation as it pertains to fish was 160 counts per square meter. But if you go on now to the next one, which is on page 112, it says success in managing existing populations of AIS to improve native plant diversity will be described in the comprehensive measured by maintaining AIS densities below their adverse impact thresholds. So the point here is that we actually, and at the bottom of that, we talk about the ecology considerations would be native plants, animal populations, fish, and recreation. So when you look at fish, the cutoff point that would be of concern would be 160 per square meter. But in the case of native plants, that doesn't really pertain because if you recall, Steve McComas mentioned that this particular hybrid is very aggressive and it loves to displace native northern milfoil. And we have a significant populations of native northern milfoil in both Lake 2 and Lake 3. So by not addressing this issue, this hybrid is going to consume and replace all that northern milfoil, and we'll have a massive problem on our hands in terms of containing it. The other thing that's of a concern is that this is different than regular Eurasian water milfoil. And Eurasian water milfoil just brings the stems up to the surface. This one, as it gets within a foot of the water, the hybrid branches out to 8 or 9 other stems to form a blanket on top of the water. So it's much more aggressive in terms of impact on recreational boating and so forth. So I think what we probably need to do as a department is to look at each of these situations and decide with maybe McComas's help, what kind of density we need to give us a decision path forward in terms of how to handle these different variations. So I guess what I'm saying right now, is that we've used the wrong standard for, we use the standard for fish for this particular hybrid, and we should be using a different standard to protect native plants. And Steve McCoy has confirmed very strongly that this plant, this version of the milfoil will actually replace all of our northern milfoil in Forest Lake. I don't think we want that to happen. So that's kind of the overview. I think this is a broader issue than we had thought about, and we've only addressing the fish portion of it. And so there's something else we have to look at as we move forward, as you continue to develop your plan, Garrett. It requires other areas to look at this, and McComas will have to help us also. I just want to throw that out now. Is there any questions on that? I tried to go through the points that I thought were most appropriate to our situation. But does the board have any other comments or observations?
Well, I'd like to share mine.
Go ahead.
After an almost 2-year battle, getting the district to understand that early treatment is really critical in maintaining, or in containing the growth of this very aggressive plant. You all sat through it, or most of you did it. The new folks were here too at the time. But that was the whole point. And we even talked about doing a amendment to our plan. Went through the process of how that amendment could happen. It's a minor amendment because it's still keeping within the flavor and the intention of our existing plan. We're just tweaking it so that it's more effective. So we can do that too, if we need to. But as far as any AIS, my research and its current research, it's not this old stuff that came around 10 years ago, always bends toward more aggressive treatment when it's in small clusters, so that you don't have the opportunity for it to damage your native plants. So I'm in favor of us always taking that stand.
What we didn't research thorough enough when we had that discussion was the distinction between the fish standard of stems per, because it was not heavy growth in your case either. It wasn't up to 160.
It was. We had mats of this stuff.
So maybe
North end of the
did that
lake.
lead us to the decision then to actually approve that as heavy milfoil? I know we approved it more on an exception basis, if I recall, but,
Yeah, I don't know if Garrett, maybe have to pull up the assessment work that Mr. McComas did, but I don't recall.
I think it's more of a policy decision for the board to decide.
right.
Do we want to be aggressive with this stuff, whatever it is, an AIS item? And it doesn't necessarily have to be plants. I mean, it can be an invasive like carp, it can be an invasive item like that. Filamentous algae, for example, has there's 17 varieties, and it has 2 that are in that blue-green cyanide area that is harmful for pets and humans. And so I think we need to look at any AIS, and it's been a while since I've read that section, but I'm sure it talks about something more than just plants. So we should keep that broad, aggressive position on any AIS that's coming into our water bodies. But I think the language that we have now is functional, with the exception of having those limits, having those ceilings on when it triggers. So you talk about the stem count, for example, and I think we have to get beyond that. I think we have to treat it where we find it and in the proper way. The university through MASREC has done a wonderful job of collecting information over the last 10 years. I think it's been around. And every year they add new treatment methodologies. The grant we got was just that kind of innovative research grant to try different methodologies and see how it works. So I'm in favor of it. I think if we don't, we're just gonna keep.
Well, I've been kind of concerned about getting involved with treating Eurasian water milfoil because of the cost. And Steve McComas did mention that this could very well, if we would treat these 48 acres, he said that in another 4 or 5 weeks, we could have another outburst in Second Lake or even on Third Lake. That's what happens with this type of hybrid.
Yeah.
So I think we have to be careful committing ourselves to the cost of this. As Garrett points out, our budget is somewhat limited. So we have to think this through and move cautiously as we go forward, but I think it's worthwhile trying to treat this initially to see what happens. We're trying different chemicals also at the same time to get some feedback on that. But I'd be interested in hearing from what other board members have to say on this point.
President Schmaltz,
Yes, go ahead, Chris.
and I apologize, my camera isn't working, but I'm just trying to understand everything. So the question about stem densities and the limits with respect to whether it's a concern with
Chris, we lost you.
versus other things. It's also
Chris, we lost you again. I don't know what's wrong with your speaker, but is there anything we can do?
There's nothing we can do on that.
Are you driving and maybe you're in a bad zone? I think I know what you're getting at. If you can hear me, I'm gonna talk about a little bit about the fact that, well, maybe I won't. I'll wait till you can explain yourself better. Anybody else got a question while we're waiting? Mike, go ahead.
Mr. President, managers, I think one of the things that, for discussion is the fact that with Steve McComas, I mean, his maps will indicate heavy, moderate, and light growth. With heavy still not meeting the threshold of the 160, but he's considering it, he has his own metric for heavy growth. So I think from a policy standpoint, it would be something for the board to consider, is to, you know, what is that standard that, you know, that Steve McComas with his whatever 40-some years of experience is using to create those maps and recommendations, you know, so because that's really what he's consistently said, treat the heavy growth areas. But
that was primarily for the standard of fish.
right, but those, but the current map isn't the one, isn't it? So even on this particular example and the one for Comfort Lake, the heavy growth areas did not meet that threshold of 160. They just said heavy growth. So he's marking the maps, and I don't know if Garrett's familiar enough, we don't want to speak for Mr. McComas, but how he arrives at heavy growth. And I guess is my point. And so, because you're really kind of,
Heavy growth, though, we sat through this meeting 2 days ago, so I have it written down here, and he defined it as being 160 per square meter, and that's because the fish cannot get through it. He specifically said the fish, but now we're talking about losing our northern milfoil, the native plant northern milfoil in both lakes, and having it be replaced with this. So what is the stem density for that particular ecosystem that we're trying to protect? It's probably not 160, it's probably way less, because it's wiped out northern milfoil in every other lake. So that's what we have to research, and that's why we need a different set of standards. If your recreation would be the same way, if recreation is included, it'd be a different standard perhaps. Also looking at the fact that this stem density is different than what you have with milfoil. Remember, he mentioned that
yeah.
this one has, it sprouts 12 sprouts for one sprout coming up.
Mhm.
So even though the stems is only one, it's actually 12 at the surface, and it's a very thick mat that you can't get your boat through. So
Garrett,
That's what we had.
did Steve say that it was actually 160, or did he just said it was heavy growth?
he said it wasn't
Yeah.
heavy growth, under that. It was like 120 or something like that.
But he still marked it as heavy growth.
The delineation maps, so yes, his protocol is typically included in those year-end reports. So for like the Forest Lake, Curly Pondweed, Eurasian Watermelon Milfoil, and Flying Rush report, year-end report, he'll include photos of the rakes. So light growth is typically one stem of EWM, medium growth, moderate growth is 2 to 4, something like that, and then heavy growth is anything from 5 stems and up. So when he's saying heavy growth, it can be significantly below the 180 stems per square meter, which in his expert opinion is when he believes that it becomes an ecological threat. And he did not think during his survey on Forest Lake that any of the patches that he observed did exceed 180 stems And Tori and I were out on the water today collecting samples to get them genetically tested. We did a rake sweep of our own and we did not find 180 stems per square meter, even giving them the benefit of the doubt in sweeping in the areas of the densest growth. I can say visually though, it does look bad because once it does hit the surface, it is branching. But in terms of the fish habitat, which President Schmaltz was referring to, the actual stem density at the lake bottom was not exceeding or even nearing 180 stems in the locations we checked. If that
So
clarifies.
the question would be though, Garrett, is that what stem density will wipe out northern milfoil? We need a different standard for other native species that are attacked by this plant. Otherwise, we're gonna lose our northern milfoil. So that's what I'm suggesting, is that we cannot just use the fish standard, because maybe at 10 stems, it might wipe it out. So I think that's what the issue has to be, or is that each ecological system is different. Fish are different than animals, are different from native plants. And they have different standards that we have to address, is the point that I see on this from an engineering aspect.
President Schmaltz,
Yes.
Chris Lowe has his.
Chris, are you back online?
I'm back, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
The question that I was trying to make, and it has something to do with what you guys are talking about, but there seems to me there should be a stem count that pertains to traditional Eurasian water milfoil. And then is there maybe another standard that needs to be considered when it comes to hybrid, which can have different impacts in terms of wiping out native northern milfoil, that's excluding the impact it has to do with fish. So to me, it sounds like there has to be different metrics for different types of milfoil that we're talking about based on what that type can do and how it might impact the lake. Is that what I'm?
That's exactly what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. I think after reading through our plan, there's room to expand what we started with fish. Because we're finding out that the other factors are involved here that we have to deal with. And I think we're not gonna get an answer tonight. But the question we have is that the tri-party agreement was written around our 10-year plan. And it stands for right now, since we don't have quote heavy stem growth there, we're not eligible to contribute to the payment. And so that's why I'm saying that we should look at this not from a fish aspect, but from a northern milfoil aspect, being the fact that that's a native species that's going to be wiped out if we don't try to control this in some way. And starting now is a good way to do it, I think.
I mean, I think you're trying to say that we need to look at it holistically, not just in a box about stem counts. And then also, you know, the district is founded upon this adaptive management style. So, and I think AIS is very quickly changing and moving. So, I'm not sure when it comes down to the language of the 10-year plan and the language of the tri-party agreement, but in concept, I think what we're talking about should be considered. As far as going outside the 180, because when I recall, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but that 180 was based on traditional milfoil, Eurasian water milfoil. So that's really irrelevant then, because we're not talking about Eurasian water milfoil, we're talking about the hybrid, which has different impacts to the lake. And other things, native vegetation, recreation.
Right. And this thing is ongoing, it's also a high profile with the public. So when they see those large masses of mats out there, you know, we need to at least do something to start with. Now, whether we can support this over the long term is another question, cost-wise.
There's a lot of money in grants for AIS treatment.
Well, that would be encouraging then, but I think we should take a step here, or at least what I recommend is we actually do and try to pull our money on this whole thing and get this treatment and see what happens with it. Manager Anderson.
May I just make one more comment though about this? It's not just the stem count, it's that narrow thinking that only if this is possible or this is prevalent and that's present and so forth. But the hybrid was what we had in our lake. And it didn't take long for the early pure Eurasian milfoil to become hybrid, because we always had the native plant here. And this is a very aggressive plant. So when you get that big mat over everything, it doesn't allow the sun to come down and feed the plants that are there. And so it can ruin the native plant bed. It also, when it dies, senescence process, I think is the right term. Phosphorus does go down into the bottom of the lake. And when you have that type of matting on the surface, you know, we should do a calculation on how much phosphorus is actually going back down into the bottom. So there's looking at this holistically and not having these guide rails on our decision making, I think is the way that we should be looking. And that was the point of rapid response is to treat it early so that it doesn't have an opportunity to spread.
Yeah, I think McComas mentioned though that this is not an early situation. It's in there now and we're gonna have to maintain it and not eliminate it because it's.
Well,
really
who's that eliminate? I mean,
Right,
you know,
right.
you've got, our goal is to be
It's
at
to control.
close to pre-development conditions as we can get. Now, are we gonna get there? Maybe not, but that's our goal. And our goal should be to stop AIS from taking over our water bodies.
So I guess, any other questions or comments from anybody else or any other thoughts or recommendations?
Yeah, President Schmaltz.
Yes, Doug, go ahead.
Yeah, this throws me back to my farming days where we had a problem like this. You hit it fast and you hit it hard because you know you weren't going to beat it by letting it go. Thanks.
Again, I'm not sure we're gonna eliminate this, but I think it
Right.
requires a response and then from there, we'll see what happens. So we're gonna learn
Yeah.
about different chemicals at the same time. And if we have to maintain this over time, we'll have to do it in the most economic way and that'll make hard decisions to be made in the future.
Yeah.
President
I think-
Schmaltz, can we ask our engineering folks to weigh in on this, whatever knowledge they have? I know they have a specialty group that deals with this. Any.
Is ER here today? Let me see who's there.
Hands here.
Dr. Wilkins.
I think McComas is probably the expert, so we spent an hour with him last couple of days ago, so.
We have experts on a contract with us, so I'm asking if we can ask them to share whatever insight they have.
Ann, do you have any thoughts on this?
Good evening, Mr. President, managers. I agree with your sentiment about being aggressive and proactive as possible. But I also know that Steve is the expert and we are here to support you and him and all of your questions and requests.
But your inclination as a specialist in this area would be to aggressively treat.
That's my
Okay.
experience.
Thank you.
President Schmaltz,
Chris, go ahead.
one more thing, Manager Anderson mentioned grants. What type of turnaround would we expect on some of those AIS grants?
The one we applied for in the DNR was the whole lake treatment, which isn't what you're talking about here, but that was open all year long. And they had certain cutoffs, you know, when you put your application in, let's say in the fall, for example. So they did have cutoffs by quarter, I think it was at the time, but it was available to you all season until the money, or all year until the money ran out, of course. So I haven't looked at it recently, Chris, but I believe the ones that I recall were also that way. There was not a set time to apply. I see Emily Hines is there, so she's got a message. So maybe she has some better insight.
I did ask Garrett to look into some of these and he indicated that particular one is no longer available.
Right. The innovation grant, yeah. The whole lake treatment one, but there's other money available for AIS.
Garrett has his hand.
Garrett, did you see Jerry's letter about what the Lake Association committed? Didn't they commit 22,500 or something like that?
I did see it, yes. What was the question? I'm sorry.
I'm saying that I think what he suggested we do is that they're willing to put up 22,500, which would be a third of what we need, and then expecting that the city and the watershed district would put up the equal amount. So we come to our 70,000. If I recall correctly from that letter. we need to pay the person doing this, you know, we're scheduled to do this on Monday. So he'll want to be paid, and so we can't, you know, wait 4 months before we pay him. So that's why we would have everybody billed separately in this whole operation, is the way we would recommend doing it.
Yeah.
And then see what happens and go from there, and then, plus the fact that we have to start, as Manager Anderson mentioned, we have to, and Chris did also, we have to start looking at the stem density issue and how it varies by the type of milfoil we have,
Or not have,
or not have, right?
exactly. Well, just, you know, the budget's coming up later on, but, you know, we're predicted to have, I think it's $1 million. It might be a little less, at the reserve state at the end of the year. I think roughly about a third of that is in dedicated, it might be 40%. There's gonna be money in the carryover, budget that we have now. And you're talking about $22,000, $25,000.
Right.
I say we do it. I'll make a motion that we authorize the expenditure of $25,000 toward the,
Up to,
up to $25,000 for the Forest Lake Eurasian water milfoil treatment.
hybrid.
I'll second that.
Okay. so
Manager
that was
Schmaltz,
Manager
I'll
Baki.
second that.
Thank you, Manager Baki. Any other discussion? Chuck
Mr.
Coleman, you
Chair?
have some comments? Yes, go ahead.
If the intent is to credit this against the district's expenditures in the tri-party agreement, do you also want to essentially amend your plan to treat despite the stem count standard?
I think, well, when we had this discussion a couple of years ago, it was left in that discussion to amend it as required in the future. So that's in the minutes. We looked at that. And so, yes, that would be our standard. As I mentioned before, and as Chris mentioned, we've got a different type of milfoil here and needs to be looked at differently, and it must have a different standards in terms of how we address it. Depending upon the ecological system we're trying to address, whether it's a native plant or whether it's a fish or whether it's an animal or some other type of situation that we have in our animal, including recreation. So, and that would be the second motion, is that we'd have to get staff to take a look at this and with McComas and see what else we can come up with to better define how we want to proceed in the future in spending our money on these types of things, because it can get quite expensive. Does that answer your question?
I'm not mindful of the specific terms of the plan, of the AIS plan, but given I believe that the tri-party agreement says that the district's authorized activities will be AIS activities consistent with your watershed plan, and then your watershed plan references your AIS plan. So I just want to make sure that your AIS plan says that you will do milfoil treatments that you're not constrained to only doing those treatments when it's above that stem count.
I think that last paragraph that came up though does give us that language. So
It does.
that we need to tweak it. There's no doubt about that, so that we're not having this conversation every time. But I believe that the intro paragraph gives us that right and authority.
Okay,
Yeah, because we're coming in on the back door on this, because rather than looking at it as a fish ecological standard, which is the 180 stems, we're looking at it as a native plant being threatened by a different version of milfoil. And in our plan, it clearly states that if native plants are threatened by an AIS, we should be addressing that issue.
Well, and
That's right.
that's how you get a hybrid
Right.
EWM, is because it's starting to intermix with the northern native milfoil.
Okay, any other questions? If not, then we'll call the question. Dory, you want to vote or call the question?
Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
President Schmaltz.
Aye. So the motion carries. Mike, do we need a motion to move ahead and look at getting a as Mr. Olman mentioned, to get a revision of how we look at this particular situation by STEM count, so forth with McComas?
Well, I think that, staff can work with Mr. Holtman to evaluate what's been discussed to see
Okay,
if it's necessary. It sounds like there's room within the existing plan to make the decision that was currently made. I think most of us are comfortable with it.
Yeah.
so we won't need a motion then. Let's just take the direction from the board then to look in this, let's get a better definition and clarity within the AIS portion.
Well, I think as Manager Lowe said, it's adaptive management and, I mean, yes, we will, as we see both different variations and new AIS, we'll want to continue to evaluate the district, the options.
The rapid response program, we probably should look at how that's defined in our 10-year plan as well. The whole point of that was not to have these restrictions where you have to, you spot it, the experts take a look at it, come up with a recommendation, and then they bring it to the board. But if it's above, I think we put $10,000 in the rapid response to start out with, so that there's a seed money basically to get started, so that you don't have to wait a week or 2 weeks for a board meeting. We could always call a special meeting, I suppose, but the whole point was to take those binders off so that people could react quickly to an invasion of a new species. And if we have constrictive language in that section, I would agree that we should look at it, talk to Chuck. But when we looked at this 2 years ago for Comfort Lake, we could do a minor amendment.
Yeah, that was confirmed in the minutes. So I guess I just want to make a point to make sure we're clear on this. I would recommend that Garrett or other staff work with Steve McComas, discuss how we would approach this issue that we're coming up with. We have a standard for fish of 180. What is the standard for something like this hybrid for native plants that are being threatened? So that's another ecological aspect of what we're dealing with, is native plants as opposed to the fish or other animal life, or even recreational issues, which is what the public is going to be most concerned about. And where this hybrid really has a high potential of impeding recreational use of the water to get out of control. So I would suggest we start with Steve and see what he has to offer, because he's kind of created this whole STEM thing himself. But it's not sufficient. What we have right now, we need something else to have a broader view of how to deal with these issues that we're dealing with.
That's why EOR's involvement is critical.
Right, same
So
way.
that we can take that broader look and not have these chains on us when we want to take action.
Right.
Mr. President, do you think?
President Schmaltz.
Mike's got the floor right now. I'll get back to you in a second.
Well, the only thing would be to establish, even based off of Mr. McComas's work, is what's the standard, because for when you're taking action or treatment, because you could imagine somebody saying, okay, well, that's heavy growth, and then the neighbor has moderate growth and, you know, or even light growth, and then they were like, well, I've got some here, you know, so in getting into that element of, you want professional service from these individuals to guide the decisions, and I think that's the one factor maybe that would have to
This,
come up with.
I agree, this can be a can of worms, because it's an unending deep black hole for money if we don't figure out a way to manage this whole situation. So
Well, you're not
that's why I was resistant to getting involved with the Rachel Water Mill for them. Look what happened to Lake Minnetonka. So, I mean, so basically, we'll just take a stab at it and see where it takes us with McComas. And I think EOR should be part of that discussion also.
Yeah.
If we have an expert from EOR.
Yeah.
And then see where those people,
agree with what I said
Yeah,
and
right.
what Ann said, is that
Right,
aggressive standards is really the way to keep it out. You're not going to eliminate it always, but keep it under control.
and I'm not necessarily sure that what we're looking at right now, we can even afford to do that, but we'd have to control it in some way that makes, that we can project to the public. what we're
Well,
doing.
don't
how much
start
we're
out
doing.
with a negative attitude.
Well,
If you want to solve the problem, have a positive attitude for it and,
Yep.
and then get what you need. There's research out there all over the place. And we can come together with an aggressive position so that we don't allow that AIS to get into that higher level of infiltration.
okay, thanks for everybody's input on this. We'll move forward on this. Garrett, thank you so much. It's been a difficult situation, but as you can see, it's complicated also, so we need to get some other input on this whole thing. Well, thank you.
President Schwalz,
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't get back to you, Chris, sorry.
that's all right. Just two kind of points that are kind of related together. I'm just trying to figure out how you can, how a rapid response program can be in alignment with something that is very specific. Like how does the watershed balance those two sides where you have specific requirements and standards to treat, but then you also have a rapid response that sometimes requires action that may be outside of what a 10-year plan might include. You know what I mean?
Oh, Chris, yeah, I think what you're talking about here is that, for a rapid response, you have to have the possibility of a new entrance coming into the lake, and where there's a possibility that you can eliminate it. But if there's 2 or 3 sites that's already present, then you're not in the rapid response, you're in the maintenance program. And we're really adding the maintenance program right now in this, because it's 48 acres, so we're not ever gonna eliminate this, and what we have to do is figure out how we can best maintain and control it, like we did with Eurasian Water Milfoil. We were able to control it at Lake One, as you've seen, for a number of years. And not many people have been able to do that, but it was done with a very aggressive approach, as Manager Anderson mentioned. So whether we can do that now, I don't know. That's something we have to take a look and see.
So are you saying a rapid,
This is not a rapid response.
right, there's a
program, no.
delay,
Yeah, it's in here now. It's gonna be
so
here
rapid
forever.
response.
So what we're trying to do is keep it to Lake
So
Two
we
right
are,
now. You're cutting
we
out
are
again.
responding rapidly, but that doesn't mean it's in response.
Yeah, well, we're responding rapidly, mainly for a couple of reasons. One is to see what chemicals work on it, because we're probably gonna see more of this year. And there's a big difference some difference in price between what we use and what we could use. So we want to get that information in right away also. But it's the horse is out of the corral, and so, we basically have to maintain the situation.
Well, Mr. President, I guess I appreciate what Manager Loth is trying to articulate in that there is a time element, and that's still what's from a rapid response component. And it is a new, the hybrid is new now to Forest Lake that, and trying to contain it within that, so. So I think it's still, a component that the board would want to have further discussion on what that means. I mean, there's still,
I agree.
because there is a time element, obviously, and that's what we're trying to address.
Right.
So having more plans and preparation, gets you to a decision faster. Thinking through all the various steps and limitations. So,
The reason we're discussing this is that because of the legal considerations of the tri-party agreement, it prevented us from participating. We got money to cover it in the tri-party agreement, but because of how the 10-year plan was supposedly written, that it constrained us from participating. That's what the position of staff was. And I don't think that our plan is that constricted right now. We can move ahead. So that's what we wanted to do. All right, thank you very much. Any other questions before we move on?
I would just, again, emphasize that we need to reach out to the University of the Maasrack program, because one of the things I read here within the last year is that they've been doing DNA testing on the hybrid and the regular EWM for several years now. And what they're finding is that it can be different in every lake, because the chemistry makeup as far as what chemical to use. So make sure that we're looking at all of that.
All right. Yeah, I think Garrett has sent material out to Montana
Yeah.
already.
Good.
Okay.
I,
All right,
Yeah.
so moving on, Garrett, go ahead.
I was just gonna follow up on it. Yes,
Okay.
staff were out this morning. We collected samples. We will be submitting them to confirm whether or not it actually is hybrid or not. We suspect yes, but we'll have those results back hopefully in a couple weeks.
Yeah, and I think Steve McComas mentioned that there's a Minnetonka version and each lake has its own
Right.
version, so you can tell what lake it could have been brought in from Minnetonka, so. Okay, so moving ahead then, into new business. High water has been an issue here with all the rain we've had, and so in Forest Lake, we've had discussions about the weir for trying to actually save the water. Manager Anderson had feedback from Comfort Lake about the fact that the water's been high, and they've been trying to understand getting readings on how high the lake is and having difficulty doing that. So we just want to do a quick survey with our own members about, have anybody else had any comments from any of our public or from lake associations about this high water issue and the need to have a better understanding of what the level is and how it's changing. Everybody understand the situation? I think in Manager Anderson's case, they couldn't get a staff gauge reading. Is that correct, Manager?
If the water is, the gauge is below the surface water by several feet. I don't know how far, but when I was told that, I sent back a response email, I think, or text to see if they could get a measure from the top of the post where the gauge is to the surface water, just so that we have an idea. That's not the scientific way to do it, of course, but DNR would be the best place to reach out and find out what happens when you have a year like this year, where you have water exceeding the height of that gauge pole. There's gotta be a way, maybe there's higher posts that the DNR can bring out, but somehow we have to get to accurate readings. And we have to be serious about it because it's going to continue if we follow the science about climate change. It's gonna continue, and we're gonna have high waters like this, into the future. So let's get a handle on it now. Yes, there was some upset, some serious upset by the board at Comfort Lake Association in not being able to get an accurate reading. So I talked to Mike about it. I think our president this year talked to Garrett about it. It came up last year when I was serving as the interim president of the CLA. And I thought the issue had been resolved, but apparently it hasn't been. One thing that I would like to recommend tonight is that we do a weekly reading. And that weekly reading is reported to all the appropriate agencies, DNR, the counties, and so forth, and there might be more. But also that we publish them on our website and in the two papers that are our registered papers for the community to find information. Chisago paper has a weekly, and always has, this has been going on for decades, where they have a weekly chart that goes into the paper, and I think it's on the 3rd page. And so everybody can go and look at all of the lakes that Chisago County has on the east side and up north. Comfort used to be on that before the district started. So we're responsible for doing our own readings, and I'm suggesting that we put our reading in the Chisago paper and in the Forest Lake paper as well, for the Washington County.
So maybe I should reframe that. Mike, do we have a policy in terms of our responsibility for doing this? What's the background on this sort of situation?
So in 2014 was another very high water year, you may recall. And at the time, neither Bone Lake nor Comfort Lake had a no wake ordinance available to address the boating that was occurring under those high water conditions. So we worked with both the Chisago County and the city of Scandia to develop or have those ordinances developed. And then the agreed upon process was that the watershed district, being the technical expert to our local partners, would be taking the readings and submitting them to the two authorities then that have the responsibility to issue, that. And so for Bone Lake, it's the city of Scandia. For Comfort Lake, it's the information is to be sent to the Chisago County, and the sheriff's department then was the one that was responsible for putting up the ordinance, and then or the sign related to the ordinance and enforcing it, and then also then the removal of the sign at such time on the, so, but again, so it was our responsibility to convey the information. And we had indicated that we were gonna more recently put it on our website. We have made some different attempts to get this automated, and so because frankly, given the technology that exists today, it's pretty surprising to me that we were not able to get this going some years back. And given the recent issues, of course, the last several years, we had drought conditions, so it wasn't much of an issue, but I've identified a couple of entities that have automated systems that are putting the information directly on their websites. So, because even a past standard for me was to check it at least three times a week, versus even one, because of the dynamic element of the lake levels, and checking especially when we had the fish barrier in Bone Lake that required daily inspection because of the potential for having some material plugging it up and then artificially raising the water level.
So are we still doing that then on a regular basis? So I mean, it doesn't sound like we are, because the meter is actually below water, so we can't measure.
Well, the observation is still being conveyed that the staff gauge is below the surface water level, so it's above the ordinary high just by default. So
Can I
Yes.
just add something super quickly? Yesterday we added the lake levels to the website for Comfort Phone and Forest Lake. It's now on the front page of the website, so that's it on the lake
Oh,
levels.
good.
Yeah, that's good.
yeah, Terry took care of that for us.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lori.
I just wanted to just clarify, it's not the sheriff's. The sheriff's officers that do this, the conservation officer from the DNR resides with the sheriff in every county. And so that's, unless they have, it's a big enough county where they have their separate one, but that's typically common. So you're giving it to the sheriff's department. I just wanted to clarify for everybody, it's really the conservation officer that they have to get the okay from now to trigger the ordinance.
That's not my understanding. It's the county ordinance. It's
Yeah.
just a separate,
Conservation officer. We don't have to quibble about this.
not the DNR conservation.
Yeah, the conservation officer assigned to the,
Why don't we research and come back and you
Yeah.
can tell us next meeting?
yeah, it's just so that people are clear. It's not the,
Right.
not the safety officers, it's the conservation.
Okay, do we have any feedback on water levels and from the other managers here? Doug and Dave? Chris?
We're pretty high over here.
But have you had
I-
anybody calling you complaining that they can't tell how high it is and all this kind of stuff?
No,
Okay.
the meter is over by the Moody parking lot, and it's really hard to get to because of cattails. So sometimes I can see it, sometimes I can't see it.
Okay. Chris, anything from Forest Lake?
I have not heard anything directly.
Okay. Manager Baki?
Mike did a nice job of explaining the process that we have. We count on the watershed district to contact the Lake Association and the city of Scandia when we have high water. We have developed a sign that quotes the city ordinance that there can be no wake within 300 feet of the lake shore. The problem is enforcing that, of course. And at our last Bone Lake Association, the discussion was whether to make the whole lake under that ordinance. And the consensus was, no, we don't want to go there. They want to keep a channel down the middle of the lake open for people who like to water ski and such. So that's where it stands.
Okay. All right, thank you, Dave. So it sounds like we've got this thing moving forward or back to where it should be, so I think we should be fine.
I just want to make a clarifying statement that Comfort Lake is different than all of our other lakes because we are at the tail end of the water. And so all the water that's backing up in Forest Lake, for example, some in the Bone Lake area, but more in the Little Comfort area, that of course goes through Comfort or Little Comfort into Big Comfort. So we're gonna see, I think, bigger bounces than what the folks in the other higher level or upstream areas are. So I just wanted to keep that in everybody's mind. And the other thing that's important to always understand is that this reading is used for scientific data collection at the state level. Our engineers can probably address that better than I can, but it really provides that long-term history of the fluctuation of water within the systems.
Okay, thank you, Manager Anderson. Moving on then, that's the old business, public relations research report.
I get to Mr. President. Oops. As noted, so last August 10th, the board had directed staff start working with MP&G on this public relations component as related to the shoreline restoration efforts of the district. So we did get a contract executed in early March, and staff, in particular Adam and Aiden, have been working with them, and this is a preliminary report for the board's review. No action is expected this evening, and then there will be further discussion at the next meeting, or first meeting in July. I will note that the board had previously given me direction to work or to contact the University of Minnesota, Dr. Mae Davenport, and her research assistant. And regarding some parallel work of their work on the social sciences of adoption of conservation. And so I have been in touch with them, and I am anticipating a scope of work early next week to be included in that July 11th.
Okay, good.
We'll see how those could potentially run in parallel.
All right, well, everybody's had a chance to look at the report. Are there any comments or questions that we want to get into today, or will we just wait till the next meeting? All right, then we'll wait till the next meeting. Thank you. Moving on then to the draft budget, and we ended our meeting last week on this discussing of the loan repayment systems, and Emily has got some options to share with us. Emily?
Okay, thank you, Mr. President, managers. So, yes, we discussed this on June 20th at the workshop, and brought forward, we posted some scenarios the next day following up to that loan discussion. I could present those here if desired, or the board could have discussion. And then alternatively, if the board would rather have budget discussions in a workshop setting, I know that's been said in the past, then we can do that too. And maybe the board would just want to discuss scheduling preferences for establishing that next workshop.
Well, I thought this loan discussion was interesting, and I had a chance to look at this in more detail. It's not clear to me, I guess, a couple things. It looks to me like we have a payment schedule set up, which is what the interest is, what the payments are due. We're gonna pay them as they come due. But we don't seem to be doing that in all cases. So I was wondering why that would be, Emily. I mean, you've got a schedule set up from 2026 through 2033. And it follows. You have two columns, total repayment, and you got estimated debt service levy. So it might be helpful if you could clarify, because if you take 2024 and you total across, we're scheduled to pay $294,000, and we did pay $294,000. I believe. And then as we go down, you're basically just showing the amount that's due based upon the repayment schedule. Don't we have to pay that in entirety? We can't underpay it though, can we?
Yeah, that's a good question and a good point to clarify. In all scenarios, in all cases, we are paying what is due. So that expense is always going to be the same in all of these scenarios. This program I asked, they don't offer loan forgiveness. So, one way or another, that expense is coming out, and all those scenarios show that expense. The thing that changes is how much of our levy, we get our levy funds that year. How much of the levy do you want to dedicate to debt services? The most simple, straightforward way you could do it is, equal to the amount that is due. So, if you have to pay 500,000 that year, then 500,000 of your levy goes to debt services. But these scenarios explore other options of, well, we levied for more than we needed for the last 2 years. It was 100,000 more in 2021 and 2022. 2022 and 2023. As of the end of 2023, we had an excess, we levied 200,000 more those 2 years. And so that levy funds, they didn't have to go out. They were greater than the expense. And so now they're just sitting in our dedicated funds. We have 400,000 right now that is sitting in the bank. It's earmarked for that specific purpose. So it's not part of our fund balance, but it's part of the cash balance when we talk about that. And so the board can continue to levy for more than what that expense is and have that savings go up. Or you could levy for less than what that expense is and start to draw from that savings, or levy equal to what the expense is. And then that 400 just kind of sits in the bank in that dedicated fund for, other, as long as the board wishes. There's different ways you can sort it.
Well, still struggling a little bit here.
We were basically building up a fund
Yeah,
in excess of those lower payments in the beginning, so that we had more cushion when we got into those higher payments. And that's what we're doing, right now.
so what's wrong with that? Is there?
Well, we don't need to do it anymore. If we do the 500,000 for those periods where we are doing 500,000 and not the exact amount, we've got enough in the reserve coming into this year, or when the 500 kicks in, so that would be next year, I think. But anyway, we've got enough of the reserve that will cover those little remainders, 14,000 here, 20,000 there, and so on. And by the time you get down to the last large payment, which is the 457,000, I don't know what year that is, I'm not looking that far over, but by the time you get down there, we have enough for those remainders. So if we have excess, what it would do is it would shorten up the repayment period.
Right.
So those smaller amounts could be tackled earlier, and so we paid the loan back 2 or 3 years ahead of time. That last loan.
What I don't understand though, Emily, is that, for example, you've got in your 10-year plan, you show for 2024 that we're gonna pay 294,000 on loan repayment. But in the spreadsheet on page 3, which is the current budget we have, you're only gonna pay 237,000 this year. So how can you underpay what the bank's gonna demand from us?
That would be 237 would be an older number. Since we closed out loan C, I got the final number from PCA, and so that 294 is when means we are doing repayments on loan A. The half-year repayment in 2024 for loan B, and then a half-year repayment on loan C. So it's just the most up-to-date number.
Well, it's a number we had at 521 though. Has it changed since then?
I could look and
And
see
then the
exactly
same
what
way
the
in-
difference
in-
is, but
In 2025, we're gonna pay 325, but your schedule shows 438 that we owe. So let's cover this offline. Maybe you and I can discuss and maybe get Manager Anderson
Yeah.
involved if we have to. I don't wanna tie everybody's time on this. It's really important that, I have never really paid much attention to this because I look like me, like you've got it well organized. I'm just having trouble understanding it, so. Why don't we work offline on this? You and I, Manager Anderson, if we have to, and then see if we can't clarify for ourselves, first of all.
okay. And the only
Okay.
thing I would just add to that is the more of the levy that we dedicate to debt services, that improves the position on the loan repayments and it, you know, we've got that cushion set aside. But the more we dedicate to debt repayment of the levy, that's less levy left over for operational costs. So
Right, I understand, but I thought we were committed to pay what we owe, so we don't have a choice, I don't believe, but that's what we have to discuss.
Yes, we're not done with the budgeting process at all.
No, I know.
And you're talking about what's left over with the proposed budget that you've given us. And so it's gonna change, and I said that at the last meeting.
Yeah.
We only got through basically the revenue side of things, you know,
Right.
and excuse me, the some of the higher expense side of things. But we hadn't talked about revenue. We hadn't talked about some of the other areas that concern me. And I'm sure some of the others have things that they need to bring forward. So we're nowhere near making statements about, you know, what's gonna be less and what's gonna be more and that kind of thing. But one thing, you know, I think Steve and I thought the whole board agreed that we instructed you not to worry about balancing the budget. What we really wanted to see is that repayment structure using those different scenarios. And so you've provided that. There's a few questions, I think, just for clarification that we need to straighten out on some of the far right columns. The second to the last and the last column on the right is showing some negative numbers that shouldn't be there, in my opinion. So we can talk about that stuff and get that straightened out, but we're not ready to make that kind of a statement about it's gonna be less dollars.
Yeah, I think one thing that worked well last year that you initiated, Emily, was the fact that we're always trying to suggest that this should be higher and this should be lower. What worked last year is when we agreed that we should put that number in there, it's not gonna go into, it's gonna go in as a possible addition or a possible contraction in a separate sheet.
Mhm.
You remember doing that last year? And then we went through each of those line items and we voted and discussed them. And decided, you know, whether it's revenue or not, we're gonna raise revenue or not, you know, that was very, very efficient. We got through it fairly quickly. So I would like to see that process that you put in place last year continue this year. For example, you've raised the salaries for next year, but Manager Anderson had asked to put about 300,000 in there, I think it was. So that's showing up in the budget. I don't wanna do that. I think we should put it on a separate sheet. Or at the end of the line saying recommended plus this number or minus this number. And why, and then we can get in and how did she come up with 300,000? And you know, that would be the normal question. You know, I could argue that we've lost an employee last year, so if we're gonna hire a new employee, we don't need to add another 200,000 back.
Well,
there.
you need to think forward then, because
Right.
that's what a budget's all about. It's a policy statement of what the district is going to focus on for the next year, and so we have to list all of that. And that's what I did.
Right.
I looked at the policy statements that I understood from our past year of conversations and where we want to be next year.
Right, it was an example, that's all.
I know you were using an example. I'm just stating my
No.
approach to this, and so we still have to have a couple of workshops, in my opinion.
Right. So if for the board and for Emily, if we can put that into place, take that back out, put it on the side somewhere on a sheet, and then we'll have a separate meeting and then the manager, same way, if you want to add something, you're free to write a note and say, I think this should be higher, it should be lower, you know, et cetera, and then we can put it in the hopper and go through line by line and make those decisions and find out and set the priorities we have to set by doing that. So that seemed to be the most efficient way last year to get it done. So that's what I'm recommending. We do the same thing, Emily, if we can. And this was good work here. I just gotta spend some more time looking at this and answer some more questions so I understand it on the loan repayment situation. Any other comments on the budget? We've got what we need for the loan thing now. We just have to clarify it with you and then we'll go from there. And when's our next budget meeting again? The 11th? July
So-
11th?
Off the next regular meeting.
The next regular meeting is July 11th. We don't have a budget workshop on the calendar yet. I can send out a poll for that. It would be helpful if managers right now would kind of give their preferences, do the evenings work better for you, or could some mornings possibly work, or, just to narrow down, the options that we can provide, just to have the most yeses, because we had a really hard time scheduling the last few, because there was not any that all 5 were available.
Right.
There was a few.
Okay, good. From our last meeting, I took some notes from comments made by different people that seemed to be very concerning to them. So I've got like 5 things I'm gonna send to you, Emily, just to kind of capture those points, to make sure we look at those again and make sure they get addressed, and I'll send those to you, because I thought they were pretty important from the
Yeah.
discussions we had.
I just want to make a comment that we should, schedule July and an August workshop for the budget, so that we're not trying to jam it into our already crammed regular meetings. It's too important of a topic to try to do at the end of the meeting, or even in the middle of something else, when you've got all these other issues you need to deal with. So that would be my recommendation, when you send out that calendar request, is to look at July and one in August.
Any other comments from the board on this? Or Emily, if you have anything to say, please say it, if you want to have any other thoughts or suggestions.
Scheduling preferences would be helpful for me right now, like days of the week, or times of day, what works best for people.
You mean
Or if
sending
you're
you?
or if anyone's expecting to be away for an extended period of time, and so like that week is a no-go for them. I can give a ton of options, and we can just whittle it down from there, but if we can whittle it down a little bit right now.
Okay, so we have some obvious conflicts with days you're gonna be gone on vacation, or you've got some work to do or something at home, you can't do it. Just send Emily a note saying these days are out, or these hours are out for me on these days, if you know that far in advance, for July and August. And that'll limit the number of things we have to go through.
Do managers know right now, by chance?
I have to look at my calendar.
Okay.
I know, I'm still on a paper calendar, so.
That's it.
All right,
Well.
it used to be up here, but it does not anymore. Okay. Anything else on budgets? All right, let's move ahead then to, looks like we're on the, we didn't have another third item, did we, that we added to the budget?
No, I just have.
Just 2 items, okay. Move on to the administrator's report. Thanks, Emily, again.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I think we did add an item Manager Baki asked about the quarterly review meeting.
oh, that's, I knew I couldn't read my writing here. Okay, thank you very much, Chuck. Okay.
Getting to the same topic.
Yeah, do you wanna, Dave, you wanna express your point there?
Yes, we have scheduled Monday, July 1st for the quarterly review with Mr. Kinney. And I know that Manager Schmaltz is not available to be at that quarterly review. We like to have 2 managers meet with Mr. Kinney on the 1st of July. I can sit in on that meeting, but we do need 1 other manager. So I just want to put that out there so that we can get that scheduled and we can get it done on Monday.
Well, I think Manager Kinney's only, or Administrator Kinney's only available towards the end of the day. But since I'm not gonna be there Monday, you could actually do it other times during the week, as I sent a note back to you suggesting that, and so you could do it,
I believe we need to stick to July 1st, as that's when I am available and Mr. Kinney is available. So let's try to stick to that. If we can get 1 other manager to sit in, I think that would be best. Otherwise, we will have to reschedule it, which is
Okay, so-
hard to do this time of year.
Yeah, Mike suggested he could work later on, maybe, after hours for a couple hours or something like that, if that would help everybody too.
4 o'clock on.
4 o'clock on, so if somebody could come in for a couple hours, or I don't know, an hour and a half is what it takes to go through that.
I'm available.
You've already done it once, so,
I have,
But-
but we've got 2 folks that are still working,
yeah.
that are left. So if they want to do it, great. But I'm just making it known that I'm available, that's all.
Thank you, Manager Anderson. I appreciate that. Chris or Doug, are you available on Monday, July 1st at 4 o'clock?
I could come, not at 4 o'clock, I could come after 5.
I would be available.
Then you use the conference room.
That sounds
So is
good to
that
me.
5 o'clock work okay for everybody? Okay, let's do it 5 o'clock on Monday then, and you have the full conference room then.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Manager
Thank you,
Anderson,
Doug.
for being
Yeah.
willing to step up too.
Certainly.
And then the next one I'll get in, we have to pick the date for the next one at a time at the same time, Dave. If you want to do that, then we'll have it on the calendar, so we won't have to scramble around. I forget what I put down. I think I sent the date to you, but I can't remember what it is right now. It's in September, if I recall.
I believe it is, yes. But now we've got July 1st down. Let's stick with that. We'll handle September when the time comes.
Okay, thank you for doing this. Okay, with that takes care of that, moving on then to administrators report.
Mr. President, managers, I don't think there's really anything here other than I had, I don't think I had included in here that earlier today, the University of Minnesota staff had asked me to come and give a presentation to Public Works. They were holding a session down in Woodbury for Public Works staff regarding the cost benefit of making the case of the cost benefit of street sweeping for municipalities. So, and then we did have during our quarterly meeting with the city of Scandia, a discussion on that topic, and I'm going to help them, staff and I are going to support working with Karma and them, see about getting something submitted on their behalf.
Thank you, good. Glad to see that program still going. Any other questions for the administrator? Okay, moving on then, MEOR, Amy?
Yeah.
I mean, Ann, I'm sorry.
Good evening, Mr. President and managers. I have a couple updates for projects from EOR. WJD6 wetland, we are working through the final project closeout procedures. Similarly, Moody Capstone, we are finalizing the construction coordination with the contractor. The modeling, Cecilio has kicked off the flood modeling project that was approved last meeting. And I'm also happy to report that preliminary monitoring results show that the alum treatment has reduced the buildup of orthophosphate concentrations in Forest Lake middle in the hypolimnian waters. So very, very encouraging to see. And also wanted to say that grab samples from Comfort Lake and Little Comfort Lake show low chloride concentrations for both lakes as well. So very good
So
results.
are we gonna get a formal report on that?
I believe that we will be giving a mid-monitoring season presentation in August. Mike, is that correct?
I think it was gonna be late July.
Late July. Yep.
Say, one of the things that came up with this hybrid milfoil that sprung up in the lake too was that, you know, the only thing that's changed is the alum treatment that we've done. So I'm just giving you a forewarning. We better do some thinking about what the possibilities are there, real or not real, because people are gonna be asking us when they start trying to drive through those matted hybrid stuff out there. So if you could think about that and get your people thinking about it, it'd be good. Is there any precedent's been set somewhere along the line that would encourage that type of occurrence occurring?
So
I'm not asking now, it's a hypothetical question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But, Mr. President, though, the University of Minnesota, I believe, Dr. was, if you recall, they were doing some pre-analysis of the Middle Basin, is that correct? So maybe we can lean into them and to help.
Either way.
On this topic as well. Because they were doing some, and I can't remember the context of the research that they were doing, but it was.
Oh, one of the thoughts I had is that this milfoil is fairly close to shore in most cases, so I was wondering if we didn't treat real shallow water, did we? We treated mainly the depths, correct?
Correct, always.
That's
So
correct.
maybe we didn't even treat that area. So something to look at.
Correct.
So,
Almost for sure, right, remembering the
right,
right, yes.
and the heaviest stuff is in the shallow riding off on the left, so,
Littoral area.
yeah, littoral.
That's the incubator of everything.
Yeah, normally they treat 10 feet of the room. And be.
Anyway, we're gonna get that question, I know we are, so. Okay, anything else, Ann?
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, appreciate it. Any other questions for EOR from the board?
If you don't mind, I was gonna do this under managers, but I think it's more appropriate here and maybe, I don't know if Cecilia's here, but Ann might be able to answer this. In the tour that we did, Doug and I went on that for Minnesota watersheds, and we stopped at the Capital Region office. And I thought I took a picture of this wonderful award that was jointly provided to EOR and Capital Region for the 2024, I think it was an architect, energy efficiency award of some kind. But the picture is not there. I didn't have my flash on the inside, so maybe that's what happened, but we were very pleased and proud of our engineer partners for accomplishing that. I didn't know that EOR was involved in the design of that building. And so I don't think we need to look any further than our current engineering firm to help us with whatever concepts we come up with. So if you could just address what award that was, because it wasn't clear, it was in an acronym on the plaque, and so I'm not sure what award it was.
Oh, maybe I can jump in. I'm not familiar with a particular plaque. I know that site has gotten multiple awards. Just recently, I believe there was one from Society of Civil Engineering, I think. But I might be wrong on that. But yeah, there's been several awards on that project. EOR was, obviously we didn't design the building itself, but we designed the kind of landscaping and the stormwater components of that site.
Okay, well, congratulations. Just, we're very proud of you to see that award because that's a spectacular building.
Thanks. And yeah, I'm sure Mike already has it, but I can re-forward to Mike or someone at district staff and they can forward it on the actual details of that award.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, then moving on then to Smith Partners. Chuck, any input or comments?
No, nothing to report, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you so much. Report of the treasurer, Manager Anderson.
Okay, income for May was $27,839. I didn't include the cents on any of this. The sources of those permits was 8,500 of that, nearly 28,000. Grants were 13,000. Interest was 5,100. Yay for us. We're on the track to do 60,000 in interest this year. That's wonderful. And there was a refund of about $1,100. Expenses of $201,451. Bills, making up that expenses, bills of $148,713. Payroll was $52,738. And the transfer request needed to pay the bills is $200,000 and the payroll is $220,000. And so I would ask that the board approve the treasurer's report of the expenses to pay and the transfer amount to be done.
Is there a second to that motion? I will second the motion to pay the bills. Tori, would you please do the roll call vote?
Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
President Schmaltz.
Aye, motion carries.
And then one final comment I just want to make. Tori sent out an email a few weeks ago about anyone who has expense reports that they need to turn in. They're due by July 11th for the first 6 months of the year. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Report of managers. Doug, you want to go first?
Well, Jackie and I were down at that conference, Tuesday and Wednesday. Very briefly, if you get the chance to go down to see how they have redeveloped the location that was the Ford assembly plant down in Highland Park, that is, they did a textbook job of putting that together with all the collaborations and bringing all the people to the table and getting the water issues hammered out before they started building. I think the result is spectacular, and it's fun for a walk, if nothing else.
Thank you, Doug.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that that was a really worthwhile 2 days. And so those of you that didn't go, you might want to just look at the syllabus for the tours that we did. It was an exhausting day on the bus. I think we went to 8 sites, maybe 9, of different lengths. Of course, one was the Alliance Building in St. Paul, and talking about the water reuse that was built into that huge complex. And they're not done. That whole area is still going to do more building, but they're using eco-friendly designs and styles provided by Capital Region Watershed. One of the most impressive for me was one of the last ones we stopped at, and that was in I think it was Maplewood and Vadnais Heights area, and the county parks department, the city government was involved, and of course, the South Washington Metro Watershed District was involved, taking a leadership role as the technical experts in the area to incorporate as much eco-friendly design and minimum amount of hard paving and hardscape. And it's very impressive. And so both of the lakes that were involved in that, Owasso and Obasso, are much cleaner than they used to be. And playgrounds were enhanced and rain gardens all over the place. It was very impressive.
Okay, thank you, Manager Anderson. You're up next, so that your comments are your own.
No, I
Okay.
have no more.
Okay, Dave Bakke?
We're still basking in the afterglow of the Bone Lake delisting party, and I understand Adam will have a follow-up report at our next meeting, but thank you for those who participated, and I look forward to the future delisting celebrations for our other lakes in our district.
That was a great celebration. You guys did a great job in terms of getting it organized and working with us, and it was very entertaining.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that as well. I learned more about Bone Lake's history, ancient history, I mean, you know, and that was really, really important. But you handled it beautifully. The Bone Lake Association, just beautiful. Starting out with that background and building up to where we are today. So kudos.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We're arranging for Santa Claus as we speak for the water skiing around the lake for the 4th of July. So that's coming up.
Very good. Chris?
President Schmaltz, I have nothing to report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then my report, we've made some progress on Willow Point. We've met with the Lake Association and we've been out looking at it. So I think the next step now is to try to contact the owner and see how serious that person is in terms of moving ahead on this whole project. So Mike, that's something we should be working on if we can. I'll drop you a note on it. The other thing is that our favorite city BMP is in progress of being restored. And unfortunately, they've had 2 big rainstorms and there's been a lot of washout into the lake. Peterson was out there again today regrading everything. For the second time, it's washed out now. It's supposed to rain tonight again and they just got it all graded. Looks beautiful, but no sod. So I don't know what they're doing. They're waiting for the grass to grow. It's gonna be a long summer, let me tell you. So anyway, hopefully that'll be finished and then we'll be done with it. Okay, any other comments from anybody else? Okay, all hope you have a very nice, relaxing 4th of July.
Board direction.
Oh, board direction. Thank you, Tori. Chuck, we have anything on board direction?
Mr. Chair, managers. Staff will undertake to communicate to Comfort Lake residents, shoreline residents, purple loosestrife management methods similar to was done for the flowering rush. Staff will look at the rapid response program and the AIS program. Generally, the flexibility to respond to AIS issues, including talking with Steve McComas regarding standards for action other than those based on stem count for fish habitat. Staff will send out a calendar request for July and August budget workshops. And then I don't know if this should go on the list, but staff will ponder the relationship between alum treatment and the water milfoil appearance or the lack thereof.
And I think one other thing we did, I think Emily asked us to, each board manager to send in any dates that were not available for workshops for the budget. And that should be sent in, let's say by Monday. You just check your calendars and just let her know so she can include those times and dates. Okay, with that, no other questions? Mike, go ahead.
Mr. President and managers, I believe we have a guest here this evening, so I thought I'd give an opportunity for an introduction.
Sure. Adriana Atchison, I work for Washington County and I'm your watershed district's contact at the county. So I just came tonight to just see how your meeting runs and kind of get a feel for the issues that you focus on and talk about.
Glad to have you.
Yeah, thank you.
We're very quiet back there.
Yes, yeah, I snuck in and, yeah.
That doesn't fit in with this kind of. Nice to have you here. Thank you for taking the time to come.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, any other comments before we break up here? So again, thanks for a good meeting. We've got through a lot of stuff and a lot of issues. Appreciate the cooperation and everybody have a nice 4th of July. Hopefully we won't have too much rain. Hopefully have a dry 4th for a change. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I will second that.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Did you make the motion? I'll second it.
Okay, so Doug made the motion and we've got manager Anderson the second.
All right.
Tori, if you could do the roll call vote.
Yeah, Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
President Schmaltz.
Aye, okay, meeting adjourned. Everybody have a nice 4th again. Thank you.
And to you too.
Bye-bye.